Tonight, former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani fighting back after taking a jab at President Obama. Giuliani claiming the president doesn't love America. Should he be eating his words or digging in his heels? Politicians and pundits already sounding off. And lawmakers on Capitol Hill scrambling for a solution. Funding for the Department of Homeland Security, it actually runs out come Friday. This as another terror group threatens to carry out attacks on U.S. soil, this time the group promising to target shopping malls. Plus, the 87th Academy Awards have wrapped up here. We're going to have a look back, some of the highlights and some of the lowlights of Sunday's award show. Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thank you very much for joining us. And tonight we're going to start with a pair of conversations springing from what Rudy Giuliani said last week about President Obama. Specifically, his comments that the president, quote, doesn't love America, end quote. It really is, in a phrase you've probably heard more than a few times recently, a question about American exceptionalism. But let's begin first with those comments themselves and the inevitable politics surrounding them. And for that, a look back at the entire story. Let's bring in our senior political correspondent, Andrew Whitman.
And Rich, you hit the highlights, but by now most people know what the former mayor said last Wednesday at a New York City fundraiser for Scott Walker. Quote, I do not believe, and I know this is a horrible thing to say, but I do not believe that the president loves America. He doesn't love you and he doesn't love me. He wasn't brought up the way you were brought up and I was brought up, through love of this country. And in follow-up interviews, Rudy went straight to race, telling the Times, quote, some people thought it was racist. I thought that it was a joke since he was brought up by a white mother, a white grandfather, went to white schools, and most of this he learned from white people. This isn't racism, the mayor said. This is socialism or probably anti-colonialism. Later on Fox News, Rudy turned down the chance to walk back his comments.
Mr. Mayor, do you want to apologize for your comment?
Not at all. I want to repeat it. The reality is, from all that I can see of this president, all that I've heard of him, he apologizes for America. He criticizes America.
And the spotlight on Giuliani only intensified over the weekend, prompting the mayor to script an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal this morning titled, My Bluntness Overshadowed My Message. The subtitle, Whether you agreed with me or not, I hope this can be the basis of a real conversation about national leadership. In it, Giuliani tried to explain his comments, writing, quote, President Obama is criticizing his country more than other presidents have done, regardless of their political affiliation, and adding, other presidents acknowledged America's flaws, but always led with a fundamental belief in the country's greatness and the example we set for the world. At the same time, some blowback, literally, from Charles Blow in the Times this morning in a column called Who Loves America? Blow's first point, 3 questions. Does exceptionalism, if one accepts the premise, bestow exemption from critique? Is uniqueness perfection? Does our difference require some sort of arresting of development? And Blow sums up, you can simultaneously love and be disappointed in the object of your love, wanting it to be better than it is. In fact, that is a measure of love. Honest critique is a pillar of patriotism. Meanwhile, conservative author Fred Siegel took to City Journal to voice what he says many on the right think of Obama in light of Giuliani's comments, complaining about what he sees as Obama's apologies for American behavior, specifically his speech in Cairo in 2009, giving credence in Siegel's mind to Islamic grievances across the U.S. or against the U.S., and Obama's comments about Christianity at the recent National Prayer Breakfast. That's the background. Then there's the 2016 politics of the comments. Most top Republicans now being asked about Giuliani or Obama or both. Scott Walker said you should ask the president what he thinks about America, adding he doesn't know if Obama is a Christian. Bobby Jindal's reaction, writing Giuliani a congratulatory letter about the comments. Jeb Bush has said nothing, a spokesman saying only that Bush does not question the president's motives. Marco Rubio took a different tack, saying there's no doubt Obama loves America. He only questions the president's policies. Rand Paul said much the same thing, adding it's a mistake to question people's motives. And finally, there's Lindsey Graham, who basically flat out contradicted Giuliani, saying, quote, I have no doubt that President Obama is a patriot. Rich?
All right, Andrew, thank you. Let's bring in our panel right now. Jeannie Zaino, professor of political science at Iona College, professor also of campaign management at NYU, and Dominic Carter, of course, political journalist and author, and Andrew Whitman, who you already met. I want to break this into 2 parts. That American exceptionalism, I think, is a fascinating conversation. We'll get into that next segment. But the comments themselves and the decision, Jeannie, to double down on the part of the mayor. I still am trying to figure out why. We talked about this a little bit last week, the guys and me, but why do you think he did it? He's not a dummy. He had to know the impact his words were going to have. He had a chance to walk it back, but he stepped it up a second time. He doesn't seem to be the birther type to me here, but again, he's bringing everything into this equation. Why do you think he's doing it?
You know, I have no idea why he's doing it, but, you know, just from the quote that Andrew just read, you know, he says it's a horrible thing to say, but, and then he proceeds to say it. So he knew exactly what he was going to say. I don't know why he proceeded to say it, except that I think what's most disturbing to me is that this is a sentiment that resonates with a good part of the party that he represents. Now, the problem for the national Republican establishment is it's not ever going to win them the White House. And so you have what has been this persistent divide in the Republican Party. And, you know, Mayor Giuliani doesn't seem like the type of person who's represented that, you know, aspect of the party. But in this remark, he really does seem to. And I'm not sure personally why he would say it or what it would possibly get him, except press coverage. It seems a little desperate in my mind.
You cover him for all those years he was there. See, I get if a Rick Perry saying it or whatever. He's trying to throw up meat, get some attention if you're a national candidate. Rudy's not running. And I don't know what he's angling here for. Why do it other than just to do it? He's obviously not only done it once, he's gone on TV defending it the second time. He's writing, as Andrew said, that op-ed piece. What's up?
To know Rudy Giuliani is to easily understand why he's doing this. I've been with Rudy for years publicly. We've gone toe-to-toe as adversaries. I've been with him in friendly circles in private for many, many hours. Rudy Giuliani, the professor alluded to this, he wants to be relevant. And he's no longer relevant. Let's be honest. Dude is doing infomercials. And so he's watching the Republican Party pass him by with the new national candidates, if you will. He failed terribly as a presidential candidate, and Rudy Giuliani wants to be relevant. And remember, in a previous presidential campaign, he relishes the role naturally of attack dog. He likes it. Yeah. So Rudy only knows one way. When he's in trouble, attack.
You don't have to let me just talk about it.
Right, if you criticize him a little bit, attack more. And if you call him a racist, God forbid, attack 5 times as hard. That's his nature. That's his DNA.
And I think that's what that room wanted to hear. And Jeannie pointed out that
Yes.
there's a large portion of this base that wants to hear that sort of
Rush
thing.
Limbaugh claims he's been overwhelmed with positive comments on the Rudy front here.
And it's like it's a way to legitimize criticism of Obama. This is all some sort of way of figuring out a validation for their criticisms of the president.
Remind people the Cairo speech, and then obviously the more recent one where the Crusades came up. If this is the driving point, I hate to bring facts into or a little bit of substance in this conversation, but if people listen to what he said, I don't know how you get he hates America.
The Cairo speech is the one that the right has picked up as being part of the apology tour to the Islamic world. And you go back and you reread the speech, and it was basically an explanation, and I wouldn't say, he never apologized, but it was saying that we made mistakes for some of our intervention in the Middle East or in the Islamic world, specifically when it came to the war in Iraq. The National Prayer Breakfast was the one, excuse me, about 3 weeks ago, where he came to the podium and he said, you know, this isn't a war against Islam, and before anybody criticizes Islamic fundamentalists, we have to realize and remember that a lot of bad has been done in the name of all religion, including Christianity through the Crusades and even legitimizing slavery and Jim Crow in the United States. A lot of people were offended by that, saying that it was basically the president turning his back or somehow blaming Christianity. We had a debate on this show about that the day after it happened. And I thought the consensus of the table was more or less that it was a contextual explanation, although maybe inappropriately placed at the prayer breakfast.
Richard, go ahead, Professor, I'm sorry.
Well, no, I was just going to say that this is where I can see where this is coming from in those 2 examples that Andrew just mentioned. You know, I was critical of the National Prayer Breakfast and the 2009 speech because this is what he opens himself up to. Those arguments can be made, and they are right to be made and debated, but not by the president of the entire United States. And that's where this becomes a problem, and he opens himself up for this criticism.
But it's that inevitable leap, though, that I question sitting here. If another president said it, would we once again have people questioning his faith or if he is a Christian or not? Remember the whole, obviously, you know, was he even an American citizen, the whole birther stuff that went on. Is it unique to this guy because of his name and what he looks like? Would we be having the same thing if Bill Clinton said this stuff?
I doubt it, but how can you separate the man from what he's saying? I mean, you can't separate the two. I doubt we would be having this discussion if it was another individual or another president who said this. But it would be problematic.
We're 6.5 years into
what president has said that kind of thing? I mean, that's the problem. He opens himself up to this criticism. For instance, the Islamic extremism argument. I get why he doesn't want to put those two together. He wants to talk about terrorism as separate from religion. I get that. And yet the facts are looking you in the face that the terrorists are saying that they are acting in the name of Islam. You know, if you're in a classroom, you can make these arguments, but for a president to make these arguments doesn't ring true politically.
He does play right, the president. He plays into the hand of his critics when he won't use the term, as the professor just said, I believe it's Islamic terrorists and so on. He plays into his critics' hands. But I just want to go back to Giuliani for 1 second so that we fully understand what you're talking about. This is the same guy in a state of the city. He's not a racist. Put that off the table. Same guy in his State of the City address got up and said, you know what? Quote, we should blow up the Department of Education. That's Rudy Giuliani. Rudy is the same guy that would not meet with black elected officials, would not do it. And if you criticize them, forget it. And 3, remember now, I know you remember this, when Amadou Diallo, the guy shot 45 times, whatever, reaching for his wallet, there were protests with Charles Rangel and other elected officials getting arrested at one police plaza every day for about a month. And Rudy would not budge. You have to understand his personality. He does not know how to give. Perhaps the Daily News had it right when they said yesterday, quoting Sharpton, that Rudy needs a hug.
Well, but you know who else? As much as you say the president may be playing into some of those Republican arguments that they'll have or conservative arguments, well, conservatives are playing exactly into. Rudy didn't do Republicans any favors.
No,
I president didn't have a great week last week. The White House, if you listen to Josh Earnest, he could barely contain, the smile on his face. This changed what's ever we're talking. They're talking about Rudy. Now, what's every presidential candidate having to answer? Do you stand by Rudy's comments or do you disavow them or whatever? My point is, this is not helpful for the Republican Party and the Republican brand right now.
Not at all. It gave potential 16 candidates an opportunity to have their Sister Souljah moment, and none of them so far have taken it, except for perhaps Lindsey Graham if he runs. Certainly not Bobby Jindal. Maybe Marco Rubio if you read that statement. To a degree. Yeah. But, it gave them an opportunity. But I agree with you. This is not helpful to the Republican Party. But, to Dominic's point, that is not what Giuliani is after. I mean, I don't think he is at all interested in
But if he wants to be relevant here, he's got to be helpful to the party if they want to make him a tack dog.
Rudy wants to remain the star, period. There's no other way to summarize it.
I think that star has started to fade. All right, now, when we come back, though, I want to come back to the subject that Andrew spoke about exceptionalism, and that in many ways a root to this conversation where Rudy went to and this debate that we've had before in this. When we come back, we're going to head to, of all places, Oklahoma, where a legislative committee has signed off on a bill to ban advanced placement history. Why, you ask? Well, the lawmaker who developed the ban says the course is unpatriotic. What really defines patriotism, and does this ban hold any weight to you? Our panel is going to weigh in on that when we return.